And our special experience of having our presently sitting International Director, Karen Lucas, come to speak to us in this last portion of the Speakers Bureau meeting. And she will be talking to us about leveraging our 21st century shift to communicate effectively. Karen Lucas, take it away.
Thank you so much, Tom. I very much appreciate it. And I love Planet Toastmasters, where you can get voluntold or nominteered to do a thing, and you are learning as you go. It is always a valuable transferable skill. What I'm going to do is share my screen. Please let me know if you see it successfully. Can you see that? Excellent. Yep. Thumbs up. Excellent. That is very good. Okay. So this is an interesting experience here in Planet Toastmasters, having to figure out how do we connect with one another and how do we talk to each other in a meaningful way where we can actually share our time, our space, our energy, and we can move forward, not just here in Toastmasters, but in any passion that you happen to have. I'm going to take it back down to a very basic question, a very human biological question for everybody in the room. Think about the last time you worked a garden and grew something that could be eaten, and type into the chat what you grew and what year you did it. I'm going to give you a few seconds. Weeds, okay, valid. I've got a few of those as well. Roger, that's awesome. They were supposed to be veggies. Oh, you know, the water restrictions really don't help matter. Tomatoes, good. Now, if you raise animals, that's acceptable. If you are a person who has chickens or goats or other animals, spearmint, very nice, Miss Edwards. Cucumbers, lettuces. I know where I'm going for lunch. Goat heads. Sure. I'm a fan of the goat and the sheep. Excellent. Look at how many people in the room here have experience and a connection with food on some basic level. Ray Marino, I see your background and I am fascinated. I'm going to get to that later, though. That is amazing. The agricultural age is something that has started as long as we've been growing things. And it didn't end in 1899. You've proven that to me because you've done zucchini forever, Sharon. And Connie grows tomatoes today even. But predominantly in the agricultural age of our country and many other countries, that was what we were doing. There wasn't a lot of technology. There wasn't any technology. And when you look at how the map shaped out in that era as we were moving west in the United States, you can see that the key cities are about a buggy's ride for a day away from each other, spaced out in that way. Life was a lot simpler. It was a lot easier back then. There's no place like home, The Wizard of Oz. If you've recognized this movie, give me a thumbs up. Have you seen The Wizard of Oz? Or I'll take Wicked even, which is a new interpretation, a new spin on it. Before it was a film, it was a book. It came out in 1939 as a film, but it was a book in 1900. And the author wasn't from Kansas. He was from New York. He was the seventh of 9 kids. And back then, there was this gold standard that was happening. And there's a lot of talk and chatter about how there's an analogy of what this movie meant back then, going from the gold standard to the silver standard. In fact, Dorothy's slippers weren't ruby in the book, they were silver. And Oz looks like ounces of gold or silver. And there's a lot of talk about what the different characters resemble. This work of fiction, one of the most popular on the planet, dropped at the turn of the last century. And while I may not buy that free silver sort of take on it, maybe I haven't read enough about gold and silver standard, I do know that I have heard in groups that look at literature, that it might have been just a simpler thing where the author grew up with that charge in the back of his head that sort of alludes to manifest destiny, go west. And from where he was at, going west, well, Kansas was like California back in those days. And the idea of going west wasn't really a big thing for him. Some people posit that the three characters represent simpler values of the agrarian days to him. And there's a lot to be said for his work. He was grappling with a very big change because in comes the industrial age. The industrial age really started kicking in the last 100 years, especially with the advent of cars. And the first car, not like the Beamers you see today, that dropped in 1886. They didn't go super fast. In fact, there was a lot of chatter about how dangerous cars were. And we were in a different time back then. There were a lot of people trying to reconcile what it was going to be like to go industrial. It doesn't happen overnight. In fact, it usually takes about 20 years of any century to really get most people on board. You have a lot of never adopters, but most people will come into most of these shifts once you have something shift in those 20 years. What shifted in the industrial age? Well, going from the farm and going into the city, getting a factory job, more technology. Now we have automation. We have a 9 to 5 punch in, punch out. Schools are designed and timed in a way where kids get used to that type of cycling. There was a lot to be said for not letting the sun catch you in bed anymore. That was something that my great uncle, who was a farmer, many of them were farmers on the East Coast of a polyculture farm. That was a phrase that pays. Don't let the sun catch you in bed. You were waking up just before the sun was. And that's because you've got animals and lots of different crops to tend to. That was at your core what you did. And you would communicate how you were connected, not just with your family, but with your community, based on what you could do and how you would put yourself out there. A lot of times were in get-togethers. The industrial age was a lot different. You had different social networks at that point starting to work about. You had a difference in how the family ate and functioned together, who stayed home and who was at work. Our society had shifts in terms of what we looked at as norms. And now here we are, we find ourselves in this internet age. 2000 to 2100 is the internet age. Now, email is actually older than I am, and we've had DARPA and these technologies that we're brewing, but we're talking about when they drop, where most of us start using these technologies or getting access to them and really having them change our lives. This one, I know, love, trust, but I understand the huge shift. When I was a little kid, I was growing up in our family's business at the shop, and it was a machine shop from Grandpa in the industrial age, World War II era, metal siding type of shop. And it was initially a shop that worked with machines that had cams and very old school type of machining. We actually had to innovate by bringing in a numerical control that was attached to a lathe and some of the newer technologies and comparators and whatnot in order to bring ourselves up to speed with new tech. So I remember what it was like being with Grandpa, being with uncles in the shop, and them being squarely in that industrial age. In fact, as a middle schooler on the lathe, working on it, shelling out a bunch of parts, I remember my grandfather behind me saying, I don't know what that box that glows is doing to that machine, but whatever it is, it can do it in hardly any time compared to what it would take for us to tool that. And I respect that. I don't think I'll ever learn it, but I'll respect that. Every now and then I have people talk to me about the ERP or other technologies here on Toastmasters, and I think about my grandfather's words, and I have nothing but grace and space for those people because I know how hard it is to embrace these things when you didn't get to grow up with them and they're unfamiliar. It's a hard shift. In fact, my first grade year was when I started using computers primarily to turn work in at school. The shift wasn't so hard for me, but for my dad, my grandfather, it was much harder. So thinking about what it looks like multi-generationally is an important thing, because how you communicate to people where they come from, what they're bringing with their filters is very important. And it's not just about what do they do for a living or where did they go to school or how did they learn. It's also, more importantly, about can you connect what you're trying to get across to them with something that's already familiar to them. That is really important. And with my grandfather and this lathe, being able to connect the numerical control with the cams that he used to use in a meaningful way was what worked out eventually to get him to understand what it was doing. It took a couple conversations, but at least he understood how important that was and how it was transforming our business. Now, the industrial age, there wasn't a whole lot of privacy concerns. There was some corporate considerations in terms of patents and things like that. There were some individual concerns. You don't want anybody taking your mail out of the mailbox, but you have privacy concerns when you're talking World Wide Web. And I'll let the other Lucas get deep diving into that. But needless to say, you could be vulnerable on the internet if you don't know who you're talking to, or you give your credentials to somebody nefarious. In fact, my grandfather's idea of phishing and my idea of phishing are two very different things. They're not even spelled the same. So thinking about the privacy concerns, this shift in society has led to a big, thick, deep layer that is much more profound than we've seen before, because this now means that you have to be concerned with your privacy. And it's not just don't click that link. It is, if you get something for free on the internet, it is highly likely that you are the product. They are getting something from you, some digital exhaust, or what some people call metadata, or some intel. It may not be your actual name. It may not be something that is on your driver's license, but it is just as valuable. And many people do not understand that. We all have these lovely smartphones that we deliberately carry around. And that right there, coupled with your laptop or anything else, can really paint a picture that can compromise your privacy. That is something that was an unintended consequence of coming onto the World Wide Web, the internet era. Oh yeah, we also had a global pandemic. So that happened. Wait a minute. I mean, as of the 25th of July, according to the World Health Organization, 2 global pandemics at this point, with the monkeypox arriving. And now we find ourselves shifting much harder than we would have if we didn't have these 2 pandemics on top of this privacy concern. And these are our shifts. Most people work from home. Internets replace most offices. So if I need to get somebody at Caltech, they might be in Switzerland, they might be up at Palomar Mountain or up north or in Hawaii. It's super easy to get a hold of them because we have an internet. I don't have to go into the clock in at an office. I don't have to run my time card anywhere. It's all here from this lovely little setup. And we're tapped in behind the Caltech safety of their firewall. Networks replace pyramids. So that org chart that my grandfather and my dad knew so well has been largely turned into a network. If I need a subject matter expert to tell me about the chemistry of fires, I'm going to go to Greg. I don't care what the heck his title is, because I know Greg's my guy for the fire thing. And that's okay. If I need to really do a deep dive about the literary background of The Wizard of Oz, I might have to hit Ray up, because it sounds like he might be my guy for that. In fact, if I want to know more about, was it Billy Beer? I think maybe Tom's my guy, considering that background. This is something where the networks are starting to replace pyramids because they're more efficient, and you can ask yourself, what does done look like? And you can leverage your network based on that. When you get into some chat rooms, when you get into some places like Clubhouse, if you don't know Clubhouse, it's an app. It's kind of like a radio that talks back to you with live people if you want it to. When you get into these social media platforms, that's where the networks really come alive. Some people even have coined the phrasing, your network is your net worth, because you are learning faster than ever before, and you're getting to done faster than ever before. Dense neighborhoods replace suburbs. That's a very big structural shift. So when you think about how many people are now in cities in the US, you have about 80% of people in the US in an urban area. Worldwide, you have 56% of people that are in cities, according to the World Health Organization. So when you look at the big shift of everybody getting to the city, that's a very different experience versus being on a farm or being in a sprawling sprawl. We have a lot of real estate in many states where you can just drive, and Richard himself had invoked Iowa. If you've ever driven through Iowa, there is a whole lot of field to look at and some wind technology now, but mostly lots of field to look at. The new social infrastructures evolve. What does that mean? Part of it was what you're seeing here on Zoom. Some people are having reunions now on Zoom. Some people are having wet Zooms with coffee, tea, or adult beverages, depending on the time and the timbre of the conversation. You have a lot of people on different styled social medias doing different things. So when you look at these new social infrastructures, you're also looking at intergenerational ones. We have scouts now that are paired with people to help them with technology that are my parents' and grandparents' age. Conversely, you would be amazed at how many people under the age of 30 do not know how to do basic things around the house, like fix a toilet, you know, that thing you sit on at least once a day, I hope, or change a light bulb. There are all sorts of things mechanically around the house. A lot of people don't really know how to do, and they don't do it well. So there is a passing of knowledge back and forth that can be gotten with these new social infrastructures. And this is something that technology can really help out with. And Frankie, you are dead on. Guess how my illustrious past region advisor husband learned to tie a bow tie? On YouTube. That's how he learned, on YouTube. And YouTube is the #1 place to go to get information. That is the platform right now. And it outpaced all these other platforms, because you can look at somebody and it's a tell, show, do, feedback structure. I didn't even ask Frankie to put that in there. That is very fortuitous. Thank you, Frankie. It is great for learning photography too, Marilyn. I mean, YouTube is great for all sorts of things. You just don't want to get into the shorts, because that's just a rabbit hole of nonsense. But if you go there with purpose, you can leave and figure out what done looks like. The other fun thing is cheating is collaboration. What we would call cheating in my grandfather's age is now considered collaboration in the research labs of Caltech and in other universities, and even in the workplace nowadays. When you look at college courses now, they test and they take things very differently than they did even 30 years ago. So how you learn and how that is checked is very different. At least 50% of all learning is online. That's a low ball, and I probably should have updated this slide in the last year. But 50% minimum of all learning is online. And I say learning on purpose. We're not talking degree programs. We're talking in real time or near time learning, where you need to know how to do a thing and do it well. Education becomes web-based. If you've heard of Coursera, raise your hand. Coursera, edX. Okay, so those are two key platforms. If you have small humans, there's Khan Academy. There's many kinds of things like Khan Academy, where all of this education is web-based. There is a very passive-aggressive owl on the Duolingo app if you're trying to learn any languages at all. And I believe our past international director, Michael Ozier, has gotten a little touch of Espanol as a result. Lo siento, yo no sé un palabra español, but he knows it. At least the owl tells me so, because I saw his profile when I looked him up. Education becoming web, sí, claro, yes. Excellent. Education becoming web-based is profound, because you are not sitting in a class with 40 people anymore. It is much more structured and tailored to you as an independent learner. That doesn't mean that you lose the team aspect, because there is collaboration in there, but it's structured very differently than even when I went to school. Oh, here we go. I do not see Miss Marjorie. Let me make sure. Okay. So how do we leverage this and what we would like to do? Yes, Greg, that is a very apt way, apropos way to put that. You want to focus, and I'm talking to adults at this point, adults, especially in business. I am focusing on competitors. I'm focusing on customers, especially if you're an entrepreneur or a business person, or any other stakeholders, but also on products and markets or economic, technological, or legal factors. That's what I'm focusing on in terms of leverage. So that may sound like a word salad, but that focus really helps a lot. For example, an old school thing like the Second Amendment and gun rights, which we're not going to get into the politics of, but if I happen to understand what that means, what the Second Amendment is, and what it means to be somebody who owns a firearm, who wants to, especially for law enforcement personnel, I have those conversations pretty regularly. So if I have an understanding of cultures outside of the US, especially in countries where firearms are not authorized for private use, or they're heavily restricted, and there is a demographic of people who are here as US citizens that would like to be in law enforcement, they are sort of behind the curve when it comes to being a police officer or being in an agency that issues you a firearm, and being able to bring them up to speed on what that's like, how often you should train, what you should think about before you ever even consider wearing one. That is something where you can leverage those factors for that group of stakeholders in my world and make it meaningful to them, because not a lot of people do that. When you come to the United States and you become a citizen, they basically say, well, there's a gun shop up the street, you can just buy one. But that's their right. But a lot of people that are very respectful of other humans and wanting to be knowledgeable owners really want to get that extra sort of white glove treatment, and maybe have a series of classes and experiences so that they feel confident and comfortable in being able to especially serve citizens around them if they are going into law enforcement or another protective service. So that is something where I've seen my father talk to people who were US citizens that just liked cowboy guns versus polycarb guns, and that was the extent of it. But this particular application helps people who are US citizens, and it's their first generation of being a US citizen, and they want to serve in our law enforcement or in other places that help people stay safe. And it's really rewarding being able to pivot and do that for these people. Sometimes that means that the training and the communication is not in English, it's in a language that's comfortable to them, because you want them to get the information down. So when you say, what does done look like? How do I connect with them and make sure that they've got it? You have to think outside of the box and meet them where they're at. They might be proficient at English, but they might be more comfortable when learning something, a skill like this, in this way. Regardless of the scope, the main purpose is to understand the external environment so that appropriate actions can be taken to stay relevant, valuable, and competitive. Now, my son poked his head in when he heard big band music. He loves big band music, and a large reason is because of Richard Snyder. He will play it on his iPad just to listen to it regularly. He loves it immensely. If I were to sit him down and train him on how to use a compact disc, a CD, his eyes would roll into the back of his head. We don't even have a CD player. There's no possible reason why he would want to learn anything about CDs. And it wouldn't be a connection to him at all. So it wouldn't be relevant, it wouldn't be valuable. And I would be competing with anything else in the room that isn't me trying to teach him how to use a CD or what it means or how the information even gets on it. So making sure that you are meeting people and getting them what they need is critical. If somebody else is doing it better, you're going to end up being Blockbuster in a Netflix world, or they're going to eat into some of your profits. Now, Michael Osier's heard this because I've grown up on this in my professional life. Connect, discover, respond is critical. It is the way to go. It's 3 simple steps. Connect with the person or the target audience that you are working with. Discover what it is that they need. What does done look like? Why is your existence justified? Yes, this is from my Starbuckian time, and it had a little dash of Franklin Covey when they trained us for like a solid month on this. We were indoctrinated in a very big way because this actually saved our bacon in a really important problem that we had at the time I was at Starbucks that I'll share with you in just a bit. And then lastly, respond. So when you think about Starbucks, I'm going to use that instead of what I was going to use because we're here for this. There's connect, discover, respond, but now we have on-site, online, and hybrid. Now, back when I was in Starbucks, when we had 9 planets and rocks for money, we didn't have the stars system in order to get free drinks and things like that. That's actually kind of money in a way, because a significant amount of purchases in the Starbucks ecosystem is all based on stars. So there is this online money system that is different than our proper money system that's layered onto that. The on-site experience to connect, discover, and respond, ideally, is to create the third place. It's not home, it's not work, but it is Starbucks, where you can get a cup of coffee or a cup of non-coffee if you like anything else, hot chocolates, teas, whatever, and you can just hang. And that was the idea at the time of on-site, be the third place. And that's how you connect, discover, respond. The hybrid version, which we see now, is I order on my phone, I walk in, I pick it up, thank you very much. It's still a personal experience where they've misspelled my name on a cup in spite of me typing it in. I don't know if that works, but it does. How do you do? How do you do? I've got my product, I skedaddle. They've gotten all 3 of these ticked off, but think about the baristas that are serving you. They have a package that keeps them compensated. And it's not just dollars, it's also stock options. It's also a free bachelor's degree from Arizona State University, which I believe Richard Snyder hails from. It's Also, more importantly, healthcare, even if you're part-time. That was a big thing for Howard Schultz back then because his father sustained an injury and it devastated their family financially, emotionally, all around. And there was zero safety net. So he was very passionate about that. But when we were sent to Costa Rica, before there were Starbucks in Costa Rica, we saw the coffee farms and the coffee growers, generations of coffee growers, dad, mom, grandparents, kids. And they would get a percentage of the adult wage every day growing and picking coffee alongside their family. It was a family business. But we don't call it a family business in the United States. What do we call that sort of setup in the United States? Child labor. Now, that's not a good headline for any company. And that wasn't something that we could reconcile as a company. So how do we connect, discover, and respond with this family business without absolutely obliterating their culture, how they do what they do? And how do we partner with them? We can't just give them Blue Cross. They're in Costa Rica. So we had to think about ways to give them the compensation package that would be meaningful, where we could come to a win-win situation. And by doing that, we considered the bigger picture and the win-win. And that was having lots of communication, having lots of discussions, leveraging what we knew about what their concerns were for their family and for the future of coffee growing, being at the behest of weather patterns. Because coffee doesn't just grow as a crop a single year. It's got to be at least 5 years deep before you can actually harvest it for something that you get paid for. So there was a lot of risk and concern with that. As a result, we ended up finding that if we built clinics and schools on site or just off of a finca, a coffee farm, and in a lot of cases paved roads with their permission, and we fully staffed those places, and we gave the kids scholarships that were equivalent to what they would expect to take home to the family as the partial adult pay every day, they would be able to get educated. And now some of those kids that we first met are now adults, and some of them have gone on to get degrees and do other things. They had choices, they had options. Some chose to stay and be that third or fourth generation coffee grower, and they can do it with technology on their finca. They can do it with more options. They can do it more elegantly because of the education that they've received. So when you collaborate and communicate, and you think about how to connect, discover, and respond, you can do anything. You can meet people where they're at and help them figure out sometimes a solution they never even expected. Usually when you have a diverse group of people at the table, you end up getting a better result than just trying to operate in an echo chamber. Look at Planet Toastmasters. For 90 some odd years, we were together, shaking hands, talking wetly with each other pre-pandemic. But many of us have grown together, and we've had to do it online. I am in real life right now. I am not a video. I am not recorded. I am here with you. And being here with you matters. It matters immensely because I can see all of you with your cameras on. And hopefully those with your cameras off, you're having a good dinner or getting dishes done because they don't do themselves. But being online opens up a world to us, a whole world to us that we couldn't access if we stayed just on site. One of the things that surprised the heck out of me when we first locked down, and this is District 12's fault, is that we, meaning my husband and I, always heard Ralph Smedley quoted, very valuable words. We heard all sorts of wonderful things about what Ralph Smedley say. Sometimes we would hear the quotes from Helen Blanchard. Now, both of them rest in peace. And then we'd hear something like recognition equals motivation. And they say, oh, Greg Scott, he was a district director or district governor at the time for us. And because they were typically ganged together in the same conversation, we made the erroneous assumption that Greg was no longer with us. He was part of the dearly departed. So imagine our surprise when a past district director or governor's meeting for District 12, just after lockdown, seeing that little box with this guy I've never seen. And Greg Scott, that can't be right. He's very much alive. Oh my gosh. Now, I got to tell you, that has been one of the most rewarding times of our experience on Toastmasters, because we assumed a thing that wasn't accurate and we didn't check our premises. Being able to connect, discover, and respond to a very living person that is very much alive in one of these Zoom boxes is really critical. And you can do that. You're here, you're in our speaker bureau. You can do that professionally. You can do that in any other nonprofit. And if you need a little help, there are lots of us in the room that know how to do hybrid too. He is alive and he is on fire, Marilyn. I absolutely concur with that. He is still around. In fact, our illustrious President's Citation Award winner, Michael Ozier, is being recognized for being able to speak in sound bites directly related with having this global pandemic hit us, being able to get critical information across to people using the radio, using the internet, using NPR and local and national news. This is how we connect, discover, and respond now. Imagine what would the world be like if we did not have this technology. So don't act small any longer. Reach out to people in any fashion you can, and make sure that whatever the medium is, be there for them. And if you need help, we're here for you. And for anybody out there that might know how to find a double whisk for my grandmother's cake recipe, give me a llamarita, because I can't find one even on Google. Mr. Toastmaster.